So what I want to do is I want to start with like a little context. Can you share the path that led you to Table 22?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was born and raised in New York City. I have always had food and bev and restaurants just a huge part of the cultural landscape of growing up and the neighborhoods of the city and kind of growing up going around with my parents and then ultimately on my own as I was older. And I always just had that kind of deep and unmistakable love for restaurants and F&B, and I found them like a portal to the world and all the different cuisines and stories and people. And so I was just magnetized to restaurants from a very early age. And once I was back in New York as a young working adult, really spending as much time and money as I could in them. And so I was building a company in my early and mid 20s, and in any free time that I had, I was just trying to be in restaurants around the city. And I had a kind of pivotal experience with one restaurant, which proudly is now one of our partners, which is called Pasquale Jones in New York. And I was living around the corner in 2016 when they opened up, and I just started going in super organically, and I loved it. And I ended up building this really deep relationship with a number of members of the team there, and the kind of thing where you sit at the counter and you're chatting with the CDC the whole night. And I came to feel like an inner, a part of the inner circle of that restaurant. And it led me to understand that there's this really important part of the restaurant business, which is the relationship between a place, an institution, and their most loyal patrons, which I very much became, or one of them at least. And that there's this, in a business that is so fragile, that operates on such thin margins, that any sort of exogenous event like a snowstorm or a rainy week could totally tip over the P&L from the black to the red. Having this base of really engaged and committed um, patrons and customers is such a lifeline and foundation for the restaurant industry. And I experienced that first from the consumer side, and I came to see that kind of flywheel of engagement that it created for both sides, and how you could also have a richer experience at a restaurant if you're part of that kind of inner circle. So it works for both sides in a really constructive way. And then, when COVID happened, we were in a position of, our business, the first company that I started had been really disrupted by the pandemic. And so we were kind of contemplating how to pivot, which is, a story I've told in other forums before, but we ended up pivoting the business. And one thing that we were, I knew that I really wanted to find something compelling in food and bev and hospitality. And I think amidst all of the challenges that were occurring in the restaurant industry during that time, there was this one silver lining that we felt like we were seeing, which was the level of deep support and patronage that consumers were kind of ready to step up and offer in that moment. And then the second was like just how creatively so many operators were finding new ways to kind of reconstitute their brand and extend it and find a way to deliver hospitality beyond the four walls of the physical dining room. And so we got inspired by that. We got inspired by this enormous flurry of new products and bundles and CPG goods and at-home experiences that came to market during that time. And I had been spending a lot of time thinking about how the industry was really having some of its deepest problems revealed, not created by COVID, but revealed and sort of unearthed. And one of the things that struck me was that this opportunity to kind of extend the brand beyond the four walls and to create patronage in a more formalized way, those were going to be durable and potentially really compelling opportunities for restaurants even after the pandemic ended. And that was our goal, was to build something that had long-term legs. And what we learned from talking to operators was just, they really need a pretty robust operating system and set of guardrails, because it's hard enough to do this on its own, to sort of take your brand and turn it into a whole suite of other products and offerings. But it's also hard to do that, when you're operating a full-time restaurant, which is a really demanding thing. And so we ended up building this whole suite of commerce tools and human support and delivery and shipping and marketing enablement so that we can make it really plug and play for a great operator to come and launch new offerings for their guests and find new ways to grow and generate revenue and margin and build more predictability into their business. So that was our story. The business started in the kind of mid to late COVID period and has grown over the last 5 years really, really dramatically, and is now part of the playbook of more than 1,000 amazing operators around the U.S.
And so it's called Table 22.
That's right.
And if you were to simplify what it is, what's the elevator pitch for it, so the people have context around tactically what it is, how it works,
Sure.
and what the benefit is.
Table22 is a platform that helps more than 1,000 of America's top food and bev operators or hospitality businesses to extend their brands into new product offerings and revenue streams that help them grow their business. And so the thing that we're best known for is subscription, club, and membership commerce. So we help all of these amazing restaurants, butchers, wine shops, bakeries to launch clubs and subscriptions that their patrons love to be a part of and routinely generate hundreds of thousands of dollars a year of extra revenue for those businesses. And then we also support a lot of drops, catering packages, holiday bundles, CPG products, all these ways that you as an operator have a ton of opportunity beyond the four walls of the dining room. We give you the system and the tools and the playbooks to harness those opportunities and make them part of your.
And so, one of the things that I think is most interesting about the evolution of the industry, especially over the last 5 years, right, is that everybody's figured out that you got to make money more than one way. The thing that I think we struggle with as an industry still to this day is clearly delineating between more work and more money. Because on the front end, they look identical, Sam, right? Everybody's sweating, money's going
Sure.
into the cash register. It's only after the fact that you figure out, which one you actually got when you check your bank account, when you check the P&L.
Yeah.
And so, there's all of this quote unquote free money out there. But the reason that I think you have, one, so many people on platform, right, and number two, so many people on the platform for so long, is because there is consistent profitability in those things. And so for people that started on their own and then quit because their mug club didn't work,
Yeah.
right? What is the differentiation? What is it that you guys are able to do or that you've figured out that no one else has?
Great question. The first thing I would say is that we've learned a lot over time, and when an individual operator attempts to go at this on their own, they're starting from a position of kind of much less information. They're on an island in a way, and when we engage with operators that are interested in starting, we're able to bring thousands of partner outcomes and data points to the table about, based on your kind of business, what kind of offerings, what kind of fulfillment cadence, which days are going to work best for you, what price points, and what is retention going to look like if it's good, better, best. And so we just start from a place of, I think, helpful expertise. We want to bring our full purview to bear of everything that we're seeing across the market in this one kind of specific part of operations and e-commerce, and get you set up with the right offering that has a lot of value and compellingness to the consumer on day one. We know what the marketing playbooks look like, and sometimes that's really kind of 101 stuff, like helping an operator set up an email list and harvest their contacts from a reservation system. And sometimes it's more sophisticated, like segmentation or A/B testing, and pre-launching to generate a wait list. These are all tactics that are part of our playbook, and we start with kind of mapping those tactics to the unique brand DNA of any individual operator on day one. The second thing I would say is that this is something that works when you put heart and soul and creativity into it. And so our mission and our purpose is to free up the operator from spending time on the kind of admin and fulfillment and ordering packaging and messing around in spreadsheets to actually like having a really dedicated system that does those things well for them, plus human support that's making sure nothing falls through the cracks so that they can focus on the parts of this experience that are going to generate a lot of long-term profitability and interest from the consumer. And by that I mean the heart and soul of the menus or the wine selections or the cuts of meat that are being included, and then doing great storytelling frankly around those things too, because I think when consumers buy something on Table 22 and they stay for years in a membership or a subscription, part of what they're getting is, yes, amazing food and bev, but part of what they're getting is a little window into the worldview of the operator, and they're getting the backstory of how the operator might have found out about this wine on a visit to the vineyard, or the meal where they first tried this dish that they're replicating in the subscription menu. And so it's really about freeing up the operator once we've kind of set them up on the front end with the right approach. It's about freeing them up to put as much of their time as possible into the parts of that experience that A, are going to create the consumer demand and retention and magic, but B, are also more connected to their purpose, which is not necessarily, back office admin stuff. So I think it's those two things and being powerful together.
What I want to talk about next is offer creation, because I think it's something that like you're really good at, and understanding the brand, and then understanding the brand's client base and figuring out, what's going to work best, the marriage between the two.
Sure.
I want to go back to the mug club for a second, because it was literally a conversation I had with a client earlier today. And she was like, nobody wants to sign up for my mug club. And I was like, it's because it's a poor offer, right? Because it's rooted in
What is a mug club?
a mug club is it's a brew pub concept,
Okay, got it,
right?
understood.
And
Yeah.
so right, and so like they want
I didn't know if we were talking coffee, physical home
no,
goods,
and like
etc. Yeah.
it's a very low barrier to entry, but I'm gonna bring it up because what I want to do is I want to try and break some of the false narratives in the industry using your worldview. So I'll use her as a great example, because I think they've got a great brew pub and like a terrible mug club offer. So they can't get people to enroll at $75, right? $75 for a year, not $7,500, $75 a month. For a year, it's only $75. But for the like 2 dozen people that they have on, they pitched those people on a $400 lifetime membership, and
Hmm.
like 6 people bought it,
Hmm.
right? And so what it shows is that like price is just a story you tell, right? Price isn't about what you pay, price is about what you get. And so I would assume that like you guys, because you do so well, you sell through and you sell out on these subscriptions and these memberships and these drops so well, that you've figured out what those levers are. And I'm pretty sure it's not discounting.
I think that's right. I think it starts from a couple of questions. One is there's like a macro level, what do we see works or work, excuse me. But then there's also um, at the individual operator level, the couple of questions that matter are what else is happening that we see success with in your category. So if you're a Thai restaurant versus a sushi place versus an Italian trattoria, um, then the next question is, what do your guests uniquely love about your concept? And so if that's the wine list and the wine program, like you're really best known for that, then maybe we want to point the subscription and offering in that direction. But if people come for fresh pasta, and that is the thing that if you asked a random person leaving the restaurant on a random night, what do you remember about the experience, and they said the fresh pasta was incredible, well, we want to orient the experience around that. And so that second question is what makes you kind of uniquely you. And then, the third question is kind of what is it that can work well within your existing operational constraints? So we meet a lot of restaurants and they work with us that they end up selling out and they're capped, which is kind of an artificial supply constraint based on how much cold storage they have or the way that they do their staffing schedule. And so we have to, they could sell more, but they're constrained by these kind of physical world factors, and so we have to take those into account as well. Historically, a lot of this conversation has been a combination of analytics work that we do on our end, plus just direct human conversations with the operator. Increasingly, we've been integrating AI as sort of a third constituency in this conversation because it's been remarkably good as we've trained it at deeply understanding. And if you think about like deep research as a feature within OpenAI, an LLM can do an incredible amount of homework on the brand of any individual merchant. And then with training from us on what it's looking for and what has worked for Table22 historically, come up with incredible generative concepts about how an operator can further monetize and create these different product and revenue formats. And so that's increasingly kind of a third leg of the stool that's just helping us have a richer and deeper conversation about how to bring their hospitality to the fore in these offerings. And it's also helping us have that conversation at a deep and rich level with more partners as we grow. And so that's just been an exciting kind of new development also.
I was having a conversation with Sahil Bloom from the Five Types of Wealth, and he said something that it was like an idea virus that just ruined my life. He said that there's nothing in the world more dangerous than a profitable distraction, and it's true. Whether we're talking about a restaurant that's just been middling for years, right? It's not making a ton of money, it's not losing a ton of money, but it just middles. But what it does is it absorbs your bandwidth.
Mhm.
Um, I think one of the reasons that your churn is so low and that people stay with Table22 for so long is because it's real revenue, right? Like this is real money that impacts like day to day, week to week, month to month, like the lives of the owners and operators that are on platform.
Yeah.
Um, how do you calculate like the scale of the opportunity? Because like if you're starting from a deep understanding of the restaurant and then a deep understanding of the guest, and then you're peppering in all of this contextual data around which works through all of these reps through Table22, then like
Sure.
are you able to delineate between, if you guys come on board, this is a $10,000 opportunity versus a $200,000 opportunity?
Yeah. I wish we could predict the future, and
Yeah, for sure. Please.
we're trying to get better and better at the level of precision with which we can predict the outcome of an individual operator. And as an aside, we're investing a lot in some of those predictive analytics, even before we ever meet an operator. So just by looking at some of the externally observable characteristics and data about how long they've been in business, their Google reviews, both volume and quality, their cuisine, et cetera, their first party web traffic. Like these are all interesting things that we can look at and build into a scoring algorithm that predicts the level of, we use the word GMV a lot, which is just how many dollars are flowing to an individual operator through our platform, which our revenue at Table22 is derivative of. So we only do well when they do, and therefore we want to work with places for their and our benefit that are gonna do really well. I think that once we start talking to an operator and we start to have some conception of what, we have our point of view based on the externally observable characteristics, then we have a point of view about what the offering is, and then we start to have an opportunity to look under the hood. And by look under the hood, I mean we get to look at what their marketing apparatus looks like, and how well they're leaned into email, how well they're leaned into on premise or in store, how well they're leaned into some of the more frontier channels like SMS. We look at what's this engagement in their social, and we can start to have some numbers that help us do some basic calculations about the average order value times the number of impressions that we're going to generate through the marketing work times the conversion rate based on the quality of the operator. And then we can start to have some directional sense. And I would say it's more order of magnitude than anything. I think we've seen partners that that have made millions of dollars on Table 22, and that's amazing.
That is
Really,
amazing.
yeah, super
That's a
proud of
lot of
that.
money, Sam.
Absolutely, yes, no
Like
question.
that's a bigger number than I thought you were gonna say.
Yeah,
That's
no,
a
it's
lot, dude.
yeah, we're super proud about that, and that's why we get up in the morning. But I think we understand. I say that to say, like, we've never made someone tens of millions or hundreds of millions. So I think we have some sense of what the kind of upper bounds are a little bit. And then of course, we wish everyone could be successful, but some folks it just doesn't land as well, and we try to reduce the rate of that over time. But I think we're getting better and better at we sort of understand the upper bound, we understand there's some failure rate, and then most people are living somewhere in the middle. And but it is not uncommon at all that folks are adding hundreds of thousands of dollars to their business through our platform, and we try to design those offerings to have really healthy margins on the front end because it's a bundle. They create it, they determine what goes in it, they can account for our platform fees on the front end, their cost of goods, and so it's designed with both like a magnitude of outcome in mind, but also hopefully a sufficient degree of profitability that it pays their rent or health insurance for the staff. And just to the point of kind of why it matters, like many of the operators that we work with, they're not in the game to make a ton of profit and ride off on a yacht. They love they love what they do. That's why they're in the business. And I think for so many of our operators, it's always amazing to hear just like the means to the end and what that Table 22 revenue enables, what it allows you to do for staff pay or benefits, or what it allows you to do for opening a second location or a commissary. And I think that's what makes many of our operators tick ultimately.
What I love about the concept is this idea of mutual investment. So, like, because you only make money when they make money, it's not like there are a bunch of people out there choosing Table 22, right? It's got to be a mutual decision, right? Because there's no
100%.
point, right? Because there's no point in you making the investment if they're destined to
Yeah.
fail. And so,
And we turn a lot of people away that we and sorry to interrupt you, but just to
no,
say,
go
like,
ahead, please.
if we see someone that wants to engage with us and we look at the profile, we look at the characteristics, we see they're not a good fit, it's not in our interest to waste their time, and it's not in our interest to like invest a lot of our team's time in activating them if neither party is going to benefit. And so we do say, like, hey, right now it feels like it's not a fit. Here are some steps you can take to build up your marketing distribution further, or et cetera, et cetera. And why don't we reconnect in 6 months or a year and see what progress has been made on those fronts that'll set us up with a more fruitful kind of set of conditions. But we you're right, it is a level of mutual investment.
Because it's not, and you tell me if I'm wrong, but like somebody that, and I'm sure people come and like it's a horrible situation to be in, right? But like I've got like 90 days worth of runway left in
Yeah,
this business and I've got to turn it around. Like that's not the core use case of Table 22, right?
that's correct. I think we can be part of the strategy of the difference between success and failure for an operator. And I'm proud to say that I think we've been many times the part of the difference between being in the red or in the black. But I think it's something that works best when it's a little more purposeful and intentional and less kind of a last resort because the core isn't working as well. I think those moments when folks come to us and they're like, "We'll do whatever you say." I think that's generally a predictor. I mean, we want them to take our advice, but when they're just like, "We'll do anything to get the revenue," it's generally not a predictor of a successful result. I think when we have operators that come to us and they have a genuine curiosity and an interest, they have a solid foundation of an on-premise business, and they have guests who love what they do. And they're curious about how to kind of creatively grow in a way that feels tasteful and authentic and true to them and their story. That's when we can really unlock something. And it feels like, okay, now we just have to find a format through which you can extend this story that's already going well, or that feels like it can grow in some meaningful way. And I think those are where you see the kind of super upside outcomes.
So we have mutual clients. That's how I was first exposed to Table 22, based
Oh,
in LA. And one of the things that came up in my prep and in talking with them more deeply about their experience, was that, marketing is just not a core focus for restaurateurs, nor is there really a lot of bandwidth for it. But one of the things that's not on your website, but I think it's worth bringing up, is the advisory around marketing and the fact that copywriting matters, right? Photography matters, brand
sure.
positioning matters, the cadence with which you reach out matters. I think that for most of us, what we do is we cobble together an email, we send it out into the abyss, we assume everybody opens it, everybody reads it, and then, they either act or don't act based on. But it's like it's a busy world out there. And so many of them have come back and said, my marketing overall is better
Huh.
because of what I've learned from working
Cool.
alongside Table 22.
That's awesome to hear. Yeah, well, one thing I want to say before I jump into the marketing piece of this is, by the time this episode airs, we will have launched an entirely new brand and digital presence for Table 22, and we're recording today in late February. But by the time this episode is released, if you go to table22.com, you'll see a really rich, what we call product marketing internally, but a really rich kind of breakout and description and layout of how we, each vector of value for the platform, but among them, the marketing support and kind of branded campaigns and automations that we provide for our partners. So you're right to call out that it's not sufficiently talked about in our web presence, and that's going to change by the time anyone here is listening. In terms of the marketing side, it's just absolutely foundational. You could have the best offering in the world, and if no one hears and knows about it, it's just going to be really hard for us to help you generate the level of revenue impact it's going to change the course of your business and make you feel like Table 22 has added a lot of value. So one of the things over time, and I think this is the power of being incentive aligned and our business model, where as a percentage of, or kind of a success based percentage fee, which is our core platform pricing model, we're so motivated to help our partners grow and succeed because we don't if they don't. And so what that means is doing things that I think you wouldn't generally find in a lot of like activation context with a technology partner or vendor, where it's we're doing things that are even outside of the purview of our core product and platform. Like, if you don't have an email apparatus set up, we're going to help you get set up with a MailChimp or like a core email service provider. We're going to help you put those best practices in place. We're going to help you amalgamate all of your contacts from your point of sale and from your reservation system. And yeah, hopefully those are, and then we're going to teach you about, segmentation and, subject lines, and open rates, and how to drive click through, and where to put the CTA in the body. And hopefully, yeah, these are things you can deploy across your whole business, which, maybe one day we'll aspire to play a broader role there, just in terms of helping our partners market and grow all the things that they want to do on premise or off. And so it's great to hear that they're benefiting in that way. It's a huge part of our intention. I think it's structural in terms of why we're motivated to do it. And the last thing I'll just say is that I think over time we're trying to, if you look at the marketing products that come from a lot of point of sale systems or online ordering systems, they're very templatized and they kind of obscure the voice and brand identity of an individual operator. And what we're trying to do is suffuse the marketing assets with the tone and visual identity, which is hard to do at scale. I think AI is helping us do that in a really exciting way. But to create beautiful, personalized, branded assets that compellingly tell the story of an individual operator and their brand. Because I do think consumers respond to that. Like, um, sometimes you think about the greatest brands in the world. Like, I don't think you would look at any of the brands in the LVMH portfolio where people have such an identity and affinity based attachment and see that they're using generic templates. And so we're trying to make our templates, or our assets, I should say, more and more personalized over time, because I think that's a big driver of outcomes.
Something else that I thought was an interesting outcome, secondary, potentially tertiary, was that they talked about frequency. And that what they talked about was, they would do a table 22 drop, and then they would actually see that, the subscribers would be coming into the restaurant to dine, to pick up food, that they would be ordering more delivery. So
Yeah,
it's not actually cannibalizing their brick and mortar business. It's complementing it.
that's absolutely right. And that's absolutely right. Table 22 can be an engagement loop with your most cherished and important patrons and guests. It may start with them buying an at-home experience, but coming back to what I mentioned earlier about the storytelling and the kind of window into the universe of an operator, this is all about deepening the connection and the loyalty between an individual customer and an individual business. And we hear from a lot of partners that manifests not just in the direct sales that they generate through the products and the boxes and the clubs and drops and so on, but also in this cohort of your guests that's coming in more frequently. A lot of our partners, and we help them do this strategically, create events and moments within the life cycle of a club or a membership where there are, special wines that they're pouring on the day that the club is being picked up. And so people actually stay for a meal and they hang out and, spend, of course, incremental dollars on premise. And so I think that is a very powerful loop, and one that we're trying to encourage more and more operators to take a couple of easy wins that will help them, generate more of that.
It triggered this idea for me, Sam. So you mentioned loyalty, and I don't think that people have a loyalty problem. I think that they have a memory problem, right? They just, how often do you think about your favorite restaurant? You never think about your favorite restaurant because you've got like a spouse and kids and a career, and you're busy, and so you never think about your favorite restaurant. But when you look at these subscriptions and when these things drop and when they ultimately land in your house, it's this triggering moment, right? And so it reminds you that they exist and you already know them, you already like them, you already trust them. And
Yeah.
it seems like this amazing tool. Not that like somebody's sitting on the couch in their underwear, right? And they're going to be like, oh, they see the basket and then they put on their clothes and they go out. But
Yeah.
in those moments where they're already inclined to go out, I think it inspires them to choose you.
I think that's totally right. And one of the areas of consumer feedback that we've received is that, let's say, for example, you buy like a supper club or a meal package from one of the restaurants that's using Table 22. Okay, sure, maybe there's a beautiful steak or a fresh pasta that you're going to kind of prepare and plate and finish at home. But one other thing that we encourage a lot of our partners to do, which I think is a great tactic, is just to include some level of like, provisions or kind of pantry goods or something, whether it's an infused olive oil or maybe even just like a dried chili that's in a powder form that they can use in their home cooking. These are the kinds of things that, okay, you have the meal, there's a great upfront dopamine hit, but then you've got a couple of things lingering like in the fridge or in the pantry, and all of a sudden in your day-to-day life, you've elevated the kind of feeling and ingredients that are a part of your cooking, but also there's this extension and longevity of those moments where let's say a restaurant like, Sarma in Boston or Kefico here in San Francisco, where I am today, those restaurants are now like in your life in a more extended way. If I could just pause, and I realize I shouldn't have referenced Kefico because they just wound down that particular offering. So if I could retake that one
Yes.
quickly.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
absolutely.
Yeah. And so just to make the point that, now not only have you enjoyed that upfront experience, but you have these products from your favorite places that are living in your home and they're part of your daily cooking. And all of a sudden that brand of that operator is kind of carrying with you through more moments. And it could be an amazing restaurant like Sarma in Boston. It could be a place like the Fox and the Knife, also in Boston. It could be a place like Anju and Chaiko in Washington, D.C., or Bufalina in Austin, Texas. And these are places where, you might have some just ongoing relationship that feels present to you beyond the individual experience of the meal. And that can be just a way that the brand is kind of persistent and present in the lives of the consumer. And I think that's very powerful.
I want to go back to pricing for a minute. Is there any price sensitivity out there? I mean, like, I know what your offering is. I mean, I don't know your whole offering, right? But like,
Sure.
I know enough about your offering to know that like some stuff is not cheap, but like very
Yeah.
accessibly priced, and some is really expensive.
Yeah.
How do you justify, not you, but the proverbial you? How does one justify like any price point with this type of offering?
Totally. I think there's a difference between value and cost, is one place that I would
Absolutely.
start. We often are working with, not exclusively, but often working with businesses that are, on the more artisanal end of the spectrum. Like they take a great degree of care in, where they source from, the farms, the winemakers, et cetera. They take a great degree of care in how they treat and compensate their staff. They take a great degree of care in how they build out and furnish their space. And ultimately, they take a great degree of care and a lot of labor in how they produce, the food and experiences that they're creating. And so there has always been a problem or a challenge in the restaurant industry of just consumers having a sufficient appreciation for all of the costs that go into a beautiful, beautiful meal enjoyed, at a restaurant or at home, if coming from a restaurant. And so I think, there's an irreducible reality of just reflecting that in these businesses that are kind of on the slower side of the slow food movement, or the slower side of, I'm actually going to retake that because that's a very specific reference, but for these businesses that are on the more kind of artisanal end of the spectrum, there's just a level of cost that's going to be reflected, and that's quality that you're getting, quality of ingredients, quality of experience, et cetera. I think what we try to do from a price perspective with all of our offerings where we can is try to be in a place where if you're getting a meal for 2 or 3 bottles of wine, the overall cost is less than if you went out, took an Uber,
Sure.
uh, all of the sort of associated things. And so we want people to feel value in that experience. The restaurant should be able to be competitive to some degree with the pricing because they're often able to use their kind of fixed assets in order to fulfill goods via Table22. So they use the space they already have, maybe a downtime or a prep shift or an off day. And so that's a lot of incremental margin when you're using the fixed costs that you already have. And you can pass some of that back onto the consumer in the form of savings. So that's the second thing I would say. And then the third thing I would say is that we really always try with our partners to create a kind of pricing ladder, if that makes sense,
It
where
does.
there's a more accessible kind of base price offering, and then have that upsell and add-on strategy, where for those people who want to spend even more, they can kind of build their bundle further, but try to have a price point on the base packages that doesn't turn too many people away.
Let's talk about consumer sentiment. We go back to, like, let's say July 2020, right? Everyone's got support local tattooed on their
Hmm.
forearm, right? It was this beautiful moment for restaurants where I think the effort that goes into creating an effortless experience became painfully obvious to people. I think that seeing so many restaurants go out of business, so many independents go out of business, it really reinforced how important independent restaurants are within their communities. And then by 2023, everybody forgot Sam. Um, and so, there's certainly an opportunity to ride that support local wave. How have you seen consumer sentiment evolve over the last several years? And how are your best partners capitalizing on?
Good question. Um, the first thing I would say is that I don't think that I don't think that some of the underlying motivations have changed or gone away. People care about their neighborhoods, they love their favorite places, and they want to eat and drink delicious stuff while supporting um, another human being, an operator owner that they love. Those things were pulled into really plain view during the pandemic, and I actually think they've settled into a more elevated place even than they were before. So, if anything, those feelings are more prominent in people than they were 10 years ago. I would think. And there's a heightened appreciation of just the fragility, I think, of these businesses, and that if you really care about them, there's a role you can play. What I'll say is that now has to be paired with just a core degree of value in what it is that you're selling and providing in a way that people were basically willing to make a donation during COVID. They didn't really care what they got. That that interest is still there, post 2022, but it has to be met with a compelling offering that justifies the spend. And so, whereas in 2020 and 2021, we could help a merchant launch almost anything, and it would see, some degree of their few dozen most loyal people sign up, even if it was basically a donation. Today, there's an incredible amount of consumer demand to be had if you do something that is great. And people are willing and ready to meet those support and interest, they're willing to bring those support and interest motivations to bear as long as you offer them something that they can hook those, dollars onto and feel like they're getting a good value. And so the bar has gone up, I think, in terms of what it is that you have to deliver because it's no longer a purely support based motivation. Those spending decisions are being evaluated in the context of all the many places, travel, other kinds of entertainment where people could be spending or even just saving. But all of our largest outcomes from a revenue generated standpoint have been occurring in the last couple of years,
Really?
well into the post pandemic period, because I think we've also just gotten a lot better at what we do,
For sure.
in terms of like this is how to create a tight offering, how to market, et cetera. And we've had to refine that, through the process of coming out of a period where support dollars were free. There's still a lot of motivation around that, but you got to deliver something exciting.
I think there's something to be said for that, right? It's the number of reps ultimately. I think that in working with strategic partners, I think I think everyone's trying to solve for money when what you're actually trying to solve for is time, right? It's because there's this associated expense in both time and money as it relates to trial and error. And I want to go
Yeah.
back to something you said earlier because so much of I think what we do as restaurateurs, it just kind of lives in the ether, right? Where we sit in these dark rooms with each other, saying, "Oh, well, maybe they'll like this, and oh, we could do this, and maybe it would be cool if we do this, and oh, these are the limitations around that." And ultimately, what you end up with is something that may work, but there's a high likelihood of failure. And AI is a phrase that gets thrown around constantly these days. But I want to go back to something you said earlier around this confluence of, the brand, right? That brand's audience, and then what has been proven to work for you consistently over several years. Um, what does that look like on the restaurant side? Does that look like I come to you and I say, we're interested in doing this, and then you revert back and you say, these are the ways in which I think you could best engage with your audience through this venue?
Yeah, it's a great question. Before I answer it directly, I'm just reminded in what you just said of a quote that I like from Nick Kokonis, who was one of the founders and leaders of the Alinea Group, and also was the founder of Talk, which is another technology company now part of the Resi Amex umbrella. Um, he had this thing that he would say was easy is expensive when he was talking to restaurant operators. And what he meant by that is if you put in not a lot of effort, you're going to get not a lot of return. But if you do something that's, you really like put heart and soul into it, and it's something valuable and great for the consumer, they're going to show up in return. And that's part of what I think is true in our and many other contexts as well. In terms of what it looks like, historically, that process of consultation is something that could only really occur through a conversation with our team. And still, to a large degree, that is a part of it. But over the last few months, by training LLMs and AI on how to learn about a brand, how we learn about a brand, then how to map the DNA of that brand to specific categories or verticals of offerings that we've seen success with, and then how to leverage their menu prices as an input into thinking about what a dinner for two should cost, or what selection of wines from their cellar might cost. We have been able to start to productize this in a really exciting way. And so if you go to table22.com and you're an operator, the first thing you'll see is the ability to plug in your website or the name of your business, and in return to have a creative offering strategy generated for you for free that can give you a very quick time to understanding and imagining, frankly, what these new models can look like for your business, these new product formats, revenue formats. And then that can be the foundation of a conversation with our team, because while some operators are ready to sign up and pay then and there, which some do, the vast majority, it's they still want to come and consult with our team. And we often feel like there are things that we catch that we want to improve or add on, or add to, relative to what the LLM or the products and AI might have generated. And so it's a conversation that is still humans and other humans, but also has a technology and data aspect to it. I think one of the phrases that I'm coalescing around more and more as a descriptor for our platform is, that we help marry technology and taste. And I think that this particular part of engaging with us is a reflection of that, and hopefully kind of the best of both worlds.
I want to talk about the product roadmap and
Sure.
kind of how you see Table 22 evolving relative to consumer trends, which you foresee in the next year or two, relative to the evolving needs of restaurants. What world do you anticipate, and what are you building to compensate?
Yeah. I mean, I think, it's hard to prognosticate about the future. And obviously, in certain ways, we're living in a very uncertain time, just in terms of the impacts that AI will have on our society, and what labor markets will look like. And so it's like what I try to do is just, we try to ground in the things that feel like durable and true in a wide variety of scenarios. And so, what do we believe? We believe restaurants have this power of kind of brand and community, and there's a lot of untapped revenue and monetization potential in that. And if we can provide the instruments for them to unlock that potential, and the support layer to make it possible, that's going to be a durable value proposition. On the consumer side, we believe that no one is going to stop loving great food. A lot of people are going to continue to care deeply about their local neighborhood and economy and the operators that they have a relationship with. And they're going to want a deeper way to have a relationship with and engage with and patronize those businesses. So if those two pillars kind of continue to be true, then our question from a product strategy perspective becomes, what are the most compelling kind of product and monetization pathways that we can enable for our operators? We started with subscriptions and clubs, and we've kind of continued to broaden beyond that with our underlying mix of tech, fulfillment, and marketing. And then, what are the support layers that make the operators' lives even easier? I think that amidst all of this, the thing that is really exciting and that we feel like we're driving towards is that Table 22 is a proactive partner in helping you grow your business. And I think to the point you made earlier, a lot of our operators already feel that, but I think there's a 10x level of that we can drive towards with AI and already are, where instead of, on some cadence, our team is coming to you with ideas about marketing or, a new campaign, the system and agents within the system are proactively suggesting new, drops and offering categories based on your brand and your inventory and the timing of the week and the month, et cetera. They are drafting those product detail pages that you can launch just with a turnkey, click of a button. They're drafted in your brand. They already know your brand. They're drafted based on conversion optimization best practices. Once you decide you want to launch the page, the agents are already creating a lifecycle marketing campaign that's driven around this. And, you can just hit approve or even give the agents permission to, be marketing these things as they see fit. Of course, we never do anything without the permission of an operator, and it's their brand and their business. But what I'm describing is an apparatus that can work for them while they're not even paying attention to it, that's constantly looking for opportunity about how they could sell more, about new models that they may not be leaned into, from a product and offering standpoint, and new marketing tactics that are going to drive more sales for them. And those things are just, shifting the role of the operator in this scenario from the blank sheet kind of burden of creation to the ease of editing and review and approval. And I think that's a really big paradigm shift in how software products generally will work for operators. But it's certainly like we're driving Table 22 to this place where it's like as if you had a team of people on staff that were constantly thinking about how to strategically grow your business, your product mix, your revenue, your margins, the returns from your marketing events. That's what we're driving towards. And we think that kind of always on growth partner is going to be a really cool experience for operators as it starts to take shape.
I've done somewhere in the neighborhood of 600 interviews at this point. And I think what you see when you interview so many successful people, especially so many successful restaurateurs, is that there are these common threads. And so when people tune in, I always think what they're trying to do is get those glimmers, right? Like those little things that they can steal for themselves that will benefit their lives and their businesses. You're a really interesting case study because you don't just sell to restaurants, right? You sell to restaurant consumers. And so I would ask you, what do you think we could learn from the way that you sell to restaurant consumers that could benefit the independents listening that maybe aren't ready for Table 22?
Just taking a moment to
Please.
think through that. I think I would come back to, I think what I can reflect on is where, what are the commonalities in the places we see the most success across our base of operators. I think that the partners who generate a lot of consumer interest and demand on the front end are doing so by connecting these new offerings to an authentic kind of North Star in their why and in their purpose, in such a way that they feel like a really natural extension of the core or original business of an operator, not like a cash grab tack on in a way. And I think that's really important. Like when an operator, one way to launch a new revenue stream is just do a static Instagram post that's like an infographic. And another way to launch a new revenue stream is to get in front of a camera, just selfie on your, smartphone, and tell a story about why this is connected to the food that you grew up eating, or the reason that you got into business in the first place, or the dishes that you've been trying and experimenting with that you're the most excited about of late, and help people feel like there's an authentic purpose and meaning behind these new products or offerings. And the more that people can see and appreciate that, the more they're going to be authentically drawn towards engaging, buying, trying, retaining in those things. So that's the first thing I would say is like having an authentic story in marketing and in the kind of product positioning just feels powerful. That could be applied across anything, not just things that one might sell through Table22. The second thing I would say is, holding the product that you're creating to the standard of something that you would be proud to hand over to, a friend of yours or a family member, and feels like a great reflection of what you do. I mean, it's such a simple thing, and we all are not perfect at it, but I think it is a good litmus test. And just, would you be proud to give this product to your partner or best friend as a gift? And I think if you're meeting that level, consumers are going to, have a line proverbially out the door to get it. And then the third and final thing I would say is just, feedback can be really powerful. And I know a lot of operators love to read their, feedback in the reservation system from guests the night before, or their Google reviews, although that's not always such a fun experience. But we systematically collect both quantitative and qualitative feedback from consumers on behalf of each of our merchants after each of their fulfillments. And we then use AI to kind of glean insights or mine insights from that base of qualitative and quantitative data that operators can use to take actionable steps to change things like portion sizes or packaging or labeling and menu cards. And, oftentimes we see these great success stories where you go from a, mediocre monthly retention outcome to a great one by making a couple of tactical changes that are very easy to ascertain through feedback. And so maybe those are my three: authentic story, product quality, and feedback from the customer.